first Doris Day to the last. I talked about Romance on the High Seas on the channel yesterday, which was Doris Day's feature film debut in 1948. And today we're jumping to 20 years later, her 1968 final film. She would still be around, but the final feature film with Six You Get Eggroll. So this is a family comedy directed by Howard Morris, which tells the story of a relatively young widow who, with plenty of children of her own, I believe there's 3 boys, and she strikes up a relationship with a handsome, I think we're told widower, with a grown daughter, and they quickly, strike a nice relationship and get married. And this leads to family comedy. Now, that little bit of snark aside, I actually really enjoyed this one more than I was expecting to be honest. I went into this one as quite the skeptical jerk. And before I forget, this is Doris Day, Brian Keith, and Barbara Hershey is the other big name in here. This is Barbara Hershey, I believe's first film I read. I'm not sure where this sits along the lines with something like Boxcar Bertha, but these are totally different sides of the film spectrum. So this is one that I ended up being pleasantly surprised by. There is a solid adult drama, relationship drama in here. I was really taken by the arc of these two kind of upper middle-aged people by this point, kind of falling in love and realizing they need each other and that their lives aren't over. And I was even able to get around, I tend to have an ambivalence towards Brian Keith. He's always very harsh and a bit loud and gruff for me. Even in something like Parent Trap, he lets a gruffness come through. And I'm sure it's supposed to code as lovable, but it never quite works for me. And he does let that come through here, but the chemistry with Doris Day really tempers all of that. They've got a very sweet, easy, relatable chemistry. And the vibe between these two is what sells the movie. I loved this art, these two people starting again, and then that factor of it being kind of in the late 60s, having them, making things work in a time where it did, you didn't necessarily start fresh. And then the ambivalence of the children is, for a big part of the movie, crafted very interestingly. I loved the relationship between Keith and then Doris Day's kind of oldest son in the film, who's used to being the man of the house. There's some really interesting things that could be said there with masculinity. And not to disparage Howard Morris at all. I adore him as an actor, and he cracks me up as a director, but I do tend to pigeonhole his work as a little silly. And there was quite a bit of depth here for a good chunk of the film. The family dynamics here are really beautiful, and it leads to an end that, well, it does get silly. It gets a little more family comedy silly that you might expect in kind of the last act, but it leads to a last scene that got me a little misty, and I thought it was definitely a beautiful way to show the message that the film is trying to come across. But I don't want to get this too long. With Six You Get Eggroll, it looks like it might be a overly silly family comedy, and there are elements here that are, but this is a grounded, solid kind of relationship comedy with some really sensitive, beautiful elements in here, and I would definitely recommend this one for those interested. Like, again, Doris Day, but it's a solid classic work and definitely one to check out. I believe I watched this one on YouTube. It was actually found pretty easily. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me here at Piercing Cinema. Have a good